Greetings, BookTube. Today we are going to talk about a book that some of you loved and some of you reviled. It is called The Midnight Library. It is by Matt Haig. So I wanted to do, this is the first book I'm really looking at that BookTube suggested to me. And this is a talk swap video, so I welcome all of you who have read this to make response videos to this one and link your video to me in the comments, please. So I'm going to be asking lots of questions about this book, putting forward a few of my own thoughts about it for you to respond to, and that's how talk swap works. I've been getting away from this and doing more pure book reviews or book discussions, I should say, because I'm not, these are always intended for people who've read things, although I'm also, hoping to inspire those of you to who haven't to read them. So this is me still trying to come to terms with BookTube. I think I can see why some of you love this, and the types of booktubers who love this and the types who didn't. Not trying to pigeonhole anybody. But as I mentioned in the tag I did recently about book snobbery, I think you're going to find that I can find some nuggets in here, maybe even a tier or two, despite some very serious problems that get in the way, I think, of what Matt's trying to say in the book. So let's take a look at some of that. First of all, the title. The title, I think, is one of the biggest problems, or not just the title, but the way it was blurbed to me. That it was, you're stuck in this land of infinite possibilities for your life. Each one is this book. I thought that was going to be a lot more fantastical and wonderful and exciting. It was not clear to me, if it was mentioned, that this is where those spoilers help, folks, that this was a person who had committed suicide and was lingering between life and death, and therefore that is the tone of all these possible lives. There's a main book that she works out of to choose those lives. It's called The Book of Regrets in the library, and I believe that would have been a better title for this book. What do you think? If not, what would be another good alternative title? All right, let's look at these lives, these regrets, and I think this will also give you an idea of the chapters of the book. She works through these regrets. I regret not staying in the labyrinths because I let down my brother. I regret not staying in the labyrinths because I let down myself. That's a band. I regret not doing more for the environment. I regret the time I spent on social media. I regret not going to Australia with Lizzie. I regret not having more fun when I was younger. I regret all those arguments with Dad. I regret not working with animals. I regret not doing geology at university instead of philosophy. I regret not learning how to be a happier person. I regret feeling so much guilt. I regret not sticking at Spanish. I regret not choosing science subjects at my A levels. I regret not becoming a glaciologist. I regret not getting married. I regret not applying to be a master's degree in philosophy at Cambridge. I regret not keeping healthy. I regret moving to London. I regret not going to Paris to teach English. I regret not finishing the novel I started at university. I regret moving, they do get to that one. I regret moving out of London. I regret having a job with no prospects. I regret not being a better sister. I regret not having a gap year after university. I regret disappointing my father. I regret that I teach piano more than I play it. I regret my financial management. I regret not living in the countryside. Long list of regrets, and it leaves one cold, like reading a listicle online. And the reason is, we'll get into the style and overwriting soon. It did make it apparent to me, at least, that this was not going to be another Sliding Doors, if you remember that 80s movie. Too many options here. But the problem is none of them really come alive for us. She could have done, perhaps not a full long list like this. She might have left out not spending time on social media, in between quitting a band and, making a vocational choice. She could even have left in a petty one or two if she wanted. I think if she had had even one in the list that grabbed one in the way of T.S. Eliot called it the objective correlative. I'll give you an example from my life. I had a girlfriend who suffered severe depression. I remember once I bought her a balloon in the mall. This balloon was bigger than she was. It's this happy face balloon. It was ginormous, biggest balloon ever. And I just remember her seeing me coming across the mall with this balloon with her, for her, and her eyes lit up. And my idea was we're going to take this balloon and we're going to let it loose into the air outside when we got outside, and it was going to carry this happiness somewhere across the Navajo reservation where we were living, and it was going to bring that happiness to someone, some random person on the Navajo reservation. She was so in love with this balloon, she desperately wanted to keep it. It's a balloon, its lifetime is short, but tragically short in this case. We got it home, holding it out the window of our car. It was insanity. We got it to the house, and as we were going through the door, it hit a nail point and popped, and she was completely and utterly deflated. Now, I don't know what that's an example of, not a regret, but it's one of the sadder moments of my life. And that is an objective correlative. That moment is, if she could have given one moment of regret like that, along with all the others, it would have lent that feeling to all of that long list. And so overwriting is a problem in this book. Let's get into the style. 69. What are some good and bad aspects of the style of the book? When does or doesn't the preaching side of things work for Mr. HAIG? Let's look at another example from the text. Death is the opposite of possibility. Yes, here we go. You have died an infinite number of times before today. Yes. Now she's in the bardo in the library, and Mrs. Elm, the librarian, is explaining all the lives because she's worried about dying in one of the lives. And Mrs. Elm says, "Didn't you want to die?" She says, "You've died an infinite number of times before today. Yes. Car accident, drug overdose, drowning, about a fatal food poisoning, choking on apple, choking on a cookie, choking on a vegan hot dog, choking on a non-vegan hot dog. Every illness is possible for you to contract or contract. You have died in every way you can or at any time you could." This one, I don't think you could even just get away with just adding one thing to the list. I think you cannot have a list of deaths like this unless it's a comedy. You're choking on all these things. You cannot have a list of deaths like this as a list like that. It just doesn't work. It's overwriting. But if you let that stop you, you won't go on to the next things where it says, "So I can open a book and just die." Not instantaneously, as with Voltaire, that's the cat, etc., etc., etc. It's not a library of corpses. So, in other words, in all the books, she's alive. In the book, they're all books of her possible lives. And it says, death is the opposite of possibility. Understand? Even though we've got all this, kind of tune me out listing going on here, boom, then you hit me with death is the opposite of possibility. A very interesting comment just in general. So before we even get into what is the afterlife, but remember specifically the context of suicide. So suicide is the death of possibilities, the opposite of life possibilities anyway. So I think a very powerful statement there. So why I think I'm not a book snob is I can take books, perhaps not super well written books, and dig for the gold in there and stay alive to it. And that's kind of a message that Matt is making about the lives that we're living, right? They're full of these mundane, listicle moments. We're just waking up, brushing my teeth, da-da-da. But you're going to stay alive to the magical moments, right? At any possible moment, you could have a nice drop of wisdom like that, or an interesting concept to ponder. So I wanted to make that statement in defense of writers. It's very hard to be a writer. I think today people are trying to write perfect, no mistakes, but I think that then they're not taking chances, and it doesn't allow for the possibility of finding some of these nuggets. So, I wish for Matt Haig to refine some of the writing, but I'm also glad that he wrote this book and that we have the opportunity to look at some of the things that he puts in here. All right, so style like the changing hair. Her hair keeps changing in all the different lives. She's changing lives like we change underwear, I guess you could say. Let's look at dialogue. How does dialogue work? So she's got this fight with Ravi right in the beginning. How do we feel like? I think it sets a template for her interaction in dialogue, which I think is not the strength of this book, and also particularly with male characters. But it's got that nugget in there where he tells her he was the member of the band that she quit, that she doesn't have stage fright, she has life fright, which obviously, again, in the context of the suicide is really powerful. Ravi, by the way, is interestingly, he's not one of the only people not redeemed in the end with the whole, wonderful life, Scrooge, Christmas morning redemption, which we all know is coming at the end, right? When she returns to the original root life. Okay, so metaphor. She has some interesting use of metaphor. She says that stepping into these lives, she doesn't have memory of these adopted lives when she enters them. She doesn't have the memories of the her that has been living that life. So she sort of just jumps right in. She says it's like being in a foreign country where you don't know the value of the currency, you don't know how much you're supposed to tip. I thought that was a good, nice metaphor. Reminding me of a poem I read years ago. I was rich in the currency of a lost kingdom. She says that life is less of a loan and more of a gift. Mrs. Elm says that. As you can only revisit each book once. So that's nice working metaphor with the library. What are some other metaphors that you thought worked well or didn't work well? Simile here. Press on life city couldn't let less desirable parts put you off the whole. Yeah, a person is like a city. This is said of Dan, the husband, or the presumptive husband that she didn't end up marrying in the real life when she tries on the life with him. She says that he has these bad bits, but a person's like a city. You can't, condemn the whole city just because it has these less desirable bits. But in a way, she does because she doesn't choose him and pretty clearly doesn't think much of him the rest of the time. Now let's look at some of the symbols. Here I think is where it's particularly grating. I think a lot of people are going to not enjoy some of this symbology. The store where she works is called String Theory, which is going to be a quanta explanation for this in-between life that she's living, a pseudoscientific one. That's prefigured in the name of the store she works at. It's also clever in that it's a music store, so I get that, but it's a little on the nose as a symbol for me. Also, especially the labyrinth. The Labyrinth is the name of her band. Very much Borges library labyrinth symbology. Very obvious. Zero to Hero is the book that her husband is reading. And later on, she has to give a speech after the author gives his talk on this book. Zero to Hero is pretty much obviously what she thinks of her husband, this book on his bedside table, the graffiti, One Earth, the TED talk that she gives about stamina right after the scene in the library where she's telling Mrs. Elm that she doesn't have the stamina to keep choosing these books anymore. Now she's an expert Olympic swimmer, and she's going to give this speech about stamina. So I consider these symbols really quite obvious. call them neon signs. You know, they're just like, look at me, look at me. They're not earned. You know, it's not like a building symbology that's little by little put in subtle ways, in percolating throughout the text, bubbling up until you're like, oh. So sources. What do we think of the sources? I go back and forth on this one. Obviously, she likes philosophy. Does she make a philosophical use of it? I hate to say that, but does she make a systematic use of it, or is it somewhat aphoristic? She likes Thoreau, to obey. What was the obeying quote? Oh, obedience is the opposite of freedom, something like that in there. I mean, one of them is like tattooed. What's the tattoo on someone's? Someone's got a tattoo. I think it might be her in one of her lives. All good things are wild and free. Neon. We've got Hobbes, Memory and Imagination, that she wrote a thesis on in one of the lives. That's kind of interesting. Hume, for whom even the life of oysters have value. Particularly interested in her work, her use of Camus. She mainly likes Thoreau, but her use of Camus is very interesting because Camus, of course, famously said, "Why not commit suicide?" So what she quotes him as saying is, "You'll never live." This is the slider, Hugo, we'll talk about in a minute. You never live if you're seeking the meaning for life. So that's how she quotes Camus, who said, of course, also famously, you must imagine Sisyphus happy. You continually need permission to be yourself. Was that Aristotle? She quoted in there, maybe. So use of philosophy, undergirding the concepts of the work, or just plopped in aphoristically. You tell me. So they've got all these inserts in the book as well. You've got the poems, two versions of the poem Fire. You got the songs, of course, Stay Out of My Life, Lighthouse Girl, Beautiful Sky especially. Every part of the chains that got scraped off because of schoolyard laughter on the advice of grown-ups long gone and the pain of friends already dead. She collected bits off the floor. So this is the poem, right? In the second form. So it's kind of interesting. You've got two forms of the poem there. You've got, especially and most importantly, the suicide note. And now I'm going to get to what I think is the strongest objection to this work. In that the author has a certain depiction of mental illness, and in particular suicidal ideation, more than ideation, a suicide attempt. And for some of us who've worked in the field, it doesn't ring quite true. Here's the suicide note. Dear whoever, I had all the chances to make something in my life and I blew every one of them. Through my own carelessness and misfortune, the world has retreated from me. And so now it makes perfect sense that I must retreat from the world. If I felt it was possible to stay, I would, but I don't, and so I can't. I make life worse for people. I have nothing to give. I'm sorry. Be kind to each other. You do sometimes get a platitude like be kind to each other. You do get sentences like I make life worse for people. A lot of the rest of this ratiocination doesn't typically appear in suicide notes. It's also very coherent. Dear whoever is interesting. I won't say more than that. I'll leave that as the question. What do we think of this suicide note as a suicide note? Do we find this convincing? To remind you of the circumstances, her cats just died. She lost her job. Her brother's come to town and not visited her, and she's had this argument with Ravi, the ex-bandmate. And that is the leading up to the suicide. mental illness seems also to be sometimes treated like sort of a mood. Like you could just sometimes take these pills, not like diabetes, you take your pill. So there's some lack of clarity on how that level of depression works. That I think we're clear in that she's got diagnosis, she's got a doctor, she's got pills. Also, by the way, you can not even barely get prescribers to give a 90-day supply of pills, let alone if you're at any kind of risk, you're going to get a 30-day supply of pills, which is going to be not enough to take your life for obvious reasons. Doctors are really careful about that. So this I think is the real, really the part you don't want to get wrong. It's so integral to the character, to the book, and it's such a touchy subject. And I think that's, if you're going to condemn the book, I think that's really the best basis on which to, in the end, be more disappointed by this book. In that it misses out on really suicide, how it works, what leads people there. You might think that suicide is highest in winter when everybody's really low. It's actually highest in spring because you've now come out of that low period and then you have this little burst of energy, right? Because it's an active act, believe it or not, committing suicide, right? You have to do some things. So you need at least a certain amount of energy, which, complete depression, you have none. You don't get out of bed. You don't go to work to get fired. None of that. So anyway, and also, of course, especially the Scrooge recovery at the end. Problematic. So yeah, if you came out of like a suicidal depression and then next thing you come out and you're like volunteering and this and that, and it's like, whoa. As a recovery strategy, that's very ambitious and you don't want to overdo it. And as a mood, that feels a bit manic. So let's look at the setting now. The real life setting is Bedford. It's a bed set city for Boston. Can't remember the big city it's near. Her family moved there from Italy to work in the brick factory of Boston, let's say brick factory, only to discover, nope, the factory is in this little nowhere town of Bedford. So that's the town she's in. That's the town which she will in the end, as we all can guess, have to choose. And it is what it is. But most of this is taking place in the Bardo, what I call the Bardo. You could call it maybe limbo if you're Catholic. This liminal in-between space of not dead, not alive. It's the stroke of midnight and time has stopped. For some people, it's a casino. For some, it's a gallery. For some, it's a restaurant. Matt missed the big one. No bus stops, no rest stops there. For her, it is for our main character, it is a library. And, of course, the Bardo must have a keeper. So let's get into the characters. Mrs. Elm is the librarian. She is a bit of I remember Morgan Freeman in, what is the movie with the file cabinets where the drawers just go on and on and on and on, that movie. Anyway, a bit of I don't know if she's an African-American character. I don't think Mrs. Elm is. But anyway, she's sort of the magical Negro, the wise person figure playing chess in the library. Yeah, very much a bit of that kind of character. How did you find? What did you think of Mrs. Elm? Is she a brilliant sensei? Teacher, never underestimate the smallest of things. Pawn. No life. There's no life without hurting others. The only way to learn is to live. You have a lack problem. Actually, that one was a little bit clever, I thought. The one maybe I'm giving the author too much credit, but the one I liked is at a certain point, they're talking about sleep and when does sleep happen, this sort of thing. And Mrs. Elm says to our main character, not everywhere is Greenwich Mean Time. I like this. What she means is you go to the life in Australia where her friend Izzy went off to, that she didn't go with her. But I like this idea of like, you're English, but not everywhere is Greenwich Mean Time, don't be so self-centered, right? A significant figure that she eventually meets after going through some of the more obvious lives, the ex-husband, the friend Izzy, the cat, a couple other things, is this slider, Hugo. Hugo also is going from life to life. And he is the one with this quasi quanta physics explanation of the collapsing wave function. I mean, to me, it could have been, it made about as much sense to me as the roommate character in one of her lives, who's a conspiracy theorist going off about how the elites are trying to kill us through our TV, through our cats, or anyway. All right, how do we feel male characters are handled in this? Since most of them are going to be male. The pressuring father, the selfish husband. I mean, these are men that happen in our lives, isn't it? The distant brother. But it does seem to sort of add up. The immoral lover, the stalker, Darwin's third law, Ryan. It's not good for the males in this book. Are they cartoons? Are they cardboard? What's going on? Is this just bad luck on the part of our main character, or is this a world full of devoid of good men? Now, of course, she eventually ends up with the sort of perfect husband life at the very, very end, which, of course, she has to reject to choose, right, the life that she's left, what they called her root life, where she's, half dead on the floor in her apartment in Bedford. So Dan, the ex-husband, here's a dialogue again with them. Tell me what you think of the dialogue there. Reads a bit stereotype to me. No one's happy, Nora. What's wrong with self-esteem? She has to hide her fire under a bushel. He asks her or they have a trivia at his pub. He dreamed of having a pub, and they have a trivia night. She pretends not to know one of the answers because she doesn't want to threaten him. Anyway, so many deaths. What's up with all the deaths in all of these lives? Someone's dead in each of them. Her brother in one. Izzy dies in the one where she goes to Australia and her best friend isn't even there. We don't even meet Izzy. She's dead in a car crash. Schrodinger's cat. Her cat is dead. Voltaire, the cat. What's up with all the death? Actually, that's an open question for you. I don't have a theory on that one. What's up with all the deaths? Is it just convenience writing? And now let's get to our Mary Jane, our main character. Yes, Nora. Nora. She is, in various lives, an Olympic swimmer, a pop star. She wins a literary prize, high literary prize. She's a glaciologist. This is sort of kind of like what I call past life inflation, where everybody in their past lives was a Caesar or whatever. It does allow for some interesting real life stuff. She's seen as the swimmer, why she quit swimming because of the swimmer's shoulders. The audience and the media in the Star one is interesting. People in numbers are distant. The media is like a slap kiss. What is your favorite of her lives? Is it the bears, which those killed by the bear? Which one do you like best? Why is the family history given after the bear incident? Very interesting. And if anything happens, you're absolved of bad decisions, it says, as she goes through life after life. Well, that's just bad faith existentialism there. And finally, the ending. Why do you have to have the fire to, why can't she choose and for herself know that she has to go back to her root life? This is, I think, the ultimate question here. So there you go. Some nuggets of wisdom hidden in some overwriting, perhaps, but the premise is there for some really interesting thought. And maybe we could have, maybe the mind could have been mined deeper. But try to stay alive to those little bits of wisdom or little interesting questions that you can get out of whatever you are reading. I don't rate books. I think you can guess how I would have rated uh, Midnight Library. I certainly know why those of you hated it, hated it. I certainly know why those of you loved it, loved it. And I'm here for all of you. Thank you so much.